I thought it was about time to kind of do a big wrap-up of the things that are available or that we make available, Epic makes available, both within and without the engine to help build success for independent developers, whether they're in games or VFX or just industry generally. So a little bit of a change of tone for me, but hopefully it will be useful because there's lots of information about the resources that are available to all of you. So it's worth kind of reiterating the philosophy under which the company has been built, and actually it's even more important at the moment because the last 3 years at Epic have seen us grow from 150 people to 1,900 people. Fortnite's gone through the roof. We're perceived as this big kind of behemoth company now. But the reality is we're still run by Tim. Tim still owns the majority of the company, and it's Tim's philosophy which still steers everything we do. And I think a really good example of that was demonstrated yesterday when we announced the acquisition of Quixel, and that all of Quixel's assets would be made free to all UE4 developers. And that neatly sums up the way Tim runs a business. He's very, very much about empowering developers to build the future, to build great product, because his belief is if you create the right communities, the right infrastructure, then the business itself will flow naturally anyway. It's not about nickel and diming developers, to get the money out of you straight away before you do anything. It's more about building an industry that then creates wealth across the board. And this is kind of an example of the things that we've done over the last couple of years. Making the engine free was probably the kind of first shot in that battle, for want of a better word, but we released assets from Paragon once we closed the game down. We fought for crossplay with Sony, and they, eventually conceded that. We sponsor esports. We got $100 million mega grant fund available to anybody, all under the kind of auspices of Tim's philosophy about how you run a creditable and morally right company, I guess. And that also sums it up. So if you succeed in making the next Fortnite, we'll naturally be part of that success anyway because of the way the business is structured. So we don't have to push as an upfront kind of company. Worth talking about mega grants. So at GDC this year, so in April this year, we launched $100 million as the mega grant program. And it's to support developers doing cool stuff in Unreal Engine. Doesn't really matter what that cool stuff is. So you might have the idea for a really neat tool. You can apply for a mega grant. You may be looking for some seed funding for your game. If it's cool enough, you can apply to the mega grant program and it will be considered. So it's always worth thinking about. If you are looking at setting up yourselves as a studio, or you have a technology that you want to try and exploit, or you have a neat game idea you've built a demo for, it's the same as the lottery in some respects, i.e. if you're not applying, you're not going to get chosen anyway. So there's no reason not to have a go at getting a mega grant. And they can go from, 20,000, 30,000, 50,000, right up to 300,000, 400,000. Having said that, it's very rare that a 300,000 mega grant gets granted. It has to be something really rather special, and the kind of application pack that goes with that would need to be outstanding. But again, it's in your own hands. And this is where you can apply for your. And it's open to, like I said, it's open to everybody. Developers, it's media entertainment, enterprise, education, tools and open source. If you've got a neat thing you've built in the engine that you think the rest of the world needs to know about, or you need a bit more money to make it available to the rest of the world, give it a shot. Epic Games Store. So last December, we launched the Epic Games Store, which was interesting. The reaction to it has been a little surprising at times. The venom that has been kind of poured through the internet on exclusives has taken everyone aback, I think, to some extent. You wouldn't go into a shoe shop on the high street and rail at them because there was a shoe shop next door cheaper, or whatever, anyway, But what we want, and again it's part of Tim's philosophy, is we want to make the ecosystems across the board fair for developers and tools providers and publishers, etc. And it's blatant. We believed it was blatantly unfair, the current split. And so, hence, our 88-18-12 split. And for us, it doesn't, to be on the store, it doesn't have to just be an Unreal Engine game. It can be a Unity game, it can be a proprietary tech game. That's not the point. The point is creating an ecosystem for games developers where they can publish their titles in a fair way and where they can get a return on their investment that allows them to continue developing games. The 70-30 split often means that a developer makes barely any money once they've recouped their investment, for want of a better word. We think this is better, we're behind it, we will stay behind it, this is how it's going to be, the store won't be changing that. It has its challenges, obviously. The more games you get, the harder it is to curate. It's a very curated service at the moment, so it is quite difficult to get a game on the store. We are doing free games for older titles, we're doing exclusives, and yes, we're paying for exclusives. You know, that's business. But ultimately, the developer benefits and the customer can benefit. If the developer thinks he can set his prices lower because he's getting a larger split, then he can pass that benefit on to the customer. And you're all developers, so that's something you perhaps need to start thinking about from a business point of view is, okay, if I had that extra, you know, few percent, what would I do with that? Would I discount my title to get more users? Would I take that money in-house to give me the fund for my war chest for my next title? Heavily curated, though, is the primary thing to realise. So right now, it's pretty hard to get a game on there. So there's quite a process, quite a review process. That will ease over time. And then as part of the store, we've got the creator program. So not only are we trying to benefit developers, we're trying to benefit the content creators that then help push the games. And so as a developer, you can assign a percentage of your take over to a creator who is pushing your product through their Twitch channel or whichever particular media provider they're using. It's 5% by default, and for the next year, we're going to be paying the first 5% anyway. So again, it's this idea of kind of kick-starting a slightly different economy, a slightly different way of developers being able to get product into the market and ultimately make a living. Another thing we have, and we've had for several years now, is Marketplace. And this is kind of our asset store, for want of a better word. 9,000 products, 2,300 sellers. Some of them are making their living on the Marketplace. Their full-time jobs are asset packs for the Marketplace. We have sales throughout the year, so you can spike your products, etc. And the revenue share is the same, 88-12. And we do have actually whole companies now just churning assets, making assets. And this is some of the nice things people say about us, you can all read. Launch in 2018, partner with creators, we give 5 packs for free each month, plus permanently free packs that are always on there. So again, as a developer, if you're looking to kind of quick start your prototyping, go to the Marketplace and download stuff that's free. You're perfectly entitled to use it. You can use it in your end game, in your finished game. But if you want to get a polished look and feel prototype up and running quickly, go to the Marketplace and download the sort of assets you want. And even more now, we have the Quixel assets coming online, though that's via their website at the moment. So there is a process. We don't just let anything through. So you can't, publish. You can't sell packs of knobs, for instance. That was a joke. So we do a business review, initial review with business. There are TRCs, as there are with all these sorts of stores. A final review by a different team member, and you can publish any time after that. And then you're paid 6 months after the close of each month. For those that are interested, web links are there. And then the kind of third area, if you like, that we really try and encourage, especially for guys like yourselves, who are at the indie end of the market, is the whole community aspect of using the engine and being part of the Epic ecosystem. So we have live streams. We'll often invite developers in on those live streams. In fact, we've had, I think Flix, who were sponsoring earlier, have been on our live streams. A whole bunch of the UK dev scene have been on there for one reason or another. And we tend to try and highlight the more interesting independent developer within those, because they benefit most from the boost of being kind of piggybacking off us. Actually, a really good example of that recently would be Deliver Us the Moon by Kyokan. They ended up on the store, but they kind of raised the awareness of their product greatly through our community services. We use our social media. We will retweet stuff. We will repost videos that we think are cool. And the whole point of this is that you should always try and be in communication with us via our community managers so that we're aware of what you're doing and can pick up on the stuff that you think is cool, and we can push it out to the wider audience. You know, another benefit of Fortnite for us is we now have 64 million people. That's a pretty big marketing budget if you try your own. We're at most of the big events throughout the year. Well, like today, we have the Unreal Mixer that Flix are sponsoring. We have these all over the country and, in fact, all over Europe. 20 a year in total, pretty much. That goes up and down a little bit. But you should be able to get to an Unreal Mixer pretty much wherever you are in the country. And there's always a good mixture of professional developers, enthusiasts, students. And that will help you start build your networks, which are going to be essential for you as you work your way through the industry. And here's some pictures to illustrate that. And there's me looking very humpbacked for some reason. And then this year we started a new program called Unreal Presents. And the idea of this is at key shows throughout the year, so Nordic Develop and an event we're putting on at Christmas, we invite between 8 and 10 developers who have a project that is somewhat into development, so it's playable. It's more than a prototype. It's probably more like a vertical slice or a minimum viable product, who are looking for publishing or investment or even just media coverage. And we invite them to demonstrate those products in a closed environment, and we invite 20, 25 investors, publishers, media people to come and spend time with the developers and the games. The idea being that they will hopefully then get either signed to a publisher, or they'll be able to raise the money they need to continue the product, or they'll be able to raise the awareness of their product. So we started that at the Nordic Games conference in Sweden back in May. We had another one at Develop in Brighton in June, July even, and then we've got one just before Christmas. And so far they've proved very successful. About 2 or 3 of the developers at each event are now in serious conversation with investors and publishers. And again, the only way we knew about those products is because of those developers staying in touch with us via the community. They highlight the work they're doing to us, and we can see what they're doing. And this is a program which will run over the next few years and probably grow into some larger events across the rest of Europe. I've just said all that. Now, Unreal Fest is a national developer conference, specifically for UE4 only. It's been running 3 years this coming year. This year's was in Prague. I keep saying last year because I think it's 2020 already. It's grown over that period. We had 900 people last year. Now, right now, down in London, there's an event called Unreal Academy, which is aimed at the non-gaming use of Unreal Engine, so architecture, automotive, etc., aerospace. We are now combining Unreal Fest and Unreal Academy next year into one big conference. It'll be about 2,000 people. It's going to be in Prague again. We keep the prices very, very low as we possibly can. We generally make the tickets include hotel rooms as well. So it's kind of very, very low friction for developers to get to, because it's aimed at members of development teams or people who are developing the titles. It's not like GDC, for instance, which is kind of more CTO level, only the senior managers get to go. This is aimed at people like yourselves who can either go as part of the company they're with or can afford to go by themselves. It's aimed at exactly at that level. And it's a mixture of content from Epic staff and from third-party developers. So anyone that shipped a game on the engine who wants to talk about a particular technique they developed can apply to us, proposing a topic. We'll consider it and then maybe have it at the conference. So a good example was this year we had Frogwares from the Sinking City, and on top of Unreal Engine they layered this whole automatic city generation tool, procedural city generation tool. And they talked about how they did that within the engine. So engine meetups, community-led events. So as you'll know, you've got one this evening, well this afternoon, 4:30, and that's led by Flix from Birmingham, who are actually becoming quite a little powerhouse development-wise, and who have kind of taken it upon themselves to help nurture the Unreal community. They're good friends of Epic. We work closely with them. And again, that gives you the opportunity to exchange ideas, to meet people, and to mix with both professionals and enthusiasts, and just kind of get the exciting stuff happening. Because like I've said previously in talks over the past, is one of the only ways you're going to be able to differentiate yourselves as students once you try and get into the job market is to build your portfolios, getting involved with virtual projects, supplying assets to somebody who is building a game somewhere. It's all of that stuff, all the extracurricular activity that you undertake is what will set you apart when you come to that graduate fair and somebody Codemasters walks up to you and says, okay, so why should I hire you? We also have a bunch of kind of more global community events. Unreal Film Jam, obviously that was aimed more at media, but there's no reason why anyone who's interested in film can't use the engine to build shorts. Doesn't matter whether you're a games developer or not. The lines are blurring between all of these disciplines now. It's particularly with the use of, Quixel again, keep coming back to those. Twinmotion was a company we acquired earlier this year, which actually really simplifies the use of the engine in, particularly architecture. We've always had our summer game jams. These are virtual game jams, they're not a physical space, and everyone's invited to get involved. You can get involved, there's no barrier to entry. And then we also had Cinematic Summer, again more aimed at the media and entertainment space and the use of real-time engines within that, which is becoming very, very prevalent. More and more we're seeing real-time engines used for previs, for films, and actually now real-time engines being used for content within films. So this brings me around to the next area, is kind of the use of the engine beyond games. The reality is right now, there's a lot of games courses across the UK and across Europe that are supplying probably more graduates than can actually be employed within the games industry itself. The barrier within the games industry has always been very high, fairly or unfairly, and the kind of job turnover is relatively low. So it is a difficult industry to break into. But actually the skills you're learning within the engine are massively sought after outside of the games industry at the moment, to the point where, were you to consider some of them, you would be probably likely to get a much better paid job with much better working hours, and in some cases even a company car, weirdly. I thought that died out years ago. And all that time, and whilst you're working within those environments, you're still using the engine and you're still honing your game skills. There's no reason why you can't bounce back through into the games industry. But why is a game technology being considered by industry that has nothing to do with games? Ultimately it comes down to, but it's robust and flexible, tried and tested engine that's been QA'd and is reliable. Not in-house built, and so it's built in a way which anyone can pick up and use. Often in-house tech is built by one particular person, and if they should ever leave a company, then that kind of knowledge goes with them. High performance, iterate regularly. Games themselves are at the forefront of 3D technology, always, bleeding edge in fact, and so it means that more traditional industries get further ahead than their competitors. And we have a unified tools and pipeline. It's because of the things that we've taken for granted within developing games and become efficient for developing games actually turns out to be quite rare across other industries. So these are images, created that are non-game images, but the kind of stuff that you could be working on as an Unreal expert. A lot of it is architectural, a lot of it is interior design type things, because of the beauty of a real-time engine is you can create the scene and then you can alter the light, you can alter the time of day, you can move the furniture, you can change anything about this scene in real time. It's real time, but this is like sorcery to a bunch of these people. So in architecture particularly, everything was pre-rendered. They would send stuff off to a render farm and get it back 5 days later at a cost of 30 grand. And they couldn't change it. Once they'd committed, that was it. Now you can create a scene like this in a week and change it in a nanosecond. And this is just a little kind of snapshot of a lot of the companies that are now using RealTime, using the Unreal Engine. And there's some pretty damn cool people there. Particularly in the M&E space and in this kind of virtual effects, so ILM, Third Floor, The Mill, all these sorts of people. And you'd kind of expect that because the content they create is very game-like in lots of ways. But then you look at, Jaguar Land Rover, and you begin to wonder, well, what do they want? But again, it's all about modelling new cars, design. Instead of building them in clay now, they build them in VR, walk around them, drive them. And they need the skills that you have because they're massively short of those skills. And this kind of leads on to what might be on the future. It's becoming very, very clear that real-time technology is permeating virtually every industry. That may not necessarily be Unreal Engine that's in every industry, but the fact that real-time is doable now on consumer-level hardware means just the cost of creating and the cost of displaying is now marginal for most industries. It used to be the case that a render farm would cost tens, 20s, hundreds of thousands and become obsolete very quickly. Now you can render, a complex scene, a car configurator on a top-end PC with a Titan, a couple of Titans or whatever the latest graphic card is, at a cost of 20 grand maybe. It's negligible. And as it becomes more ubiquitous, the idea is that almost you get to the point where you no longer really even realise that you're using the real-time technology. It becomes the underlying basis for everything rather than an engine for a specific thing. Now, I hope lots of you know about where to get the engine, how to learn to use the engine, the resources available that you can just go to straight away. But if you don't, that's where you can go. It is completely free to download. It's completely free to use. If you publish a game, then you pay 5% gross. Or you could always come and talk to us about custom licensing if that was something that you fancied. But the idea is that to get the technology in your hands, with the resources to be able to learn and use it, there is no barrier to that. There is no qualification, there is no questionnaire. You just go and you download it and you start playing. Does anyone have any questions? No one. I must be brilliant. Okay, at the back there. Sorry, can someone, sorry Dave.
So the question was, how will Epic Games in the future will address the incoming event of open sourcing when it comes to 3D modeling and open sourcing some softwares such as Blender in productions pipelines?
You can use any tools you like for creation, whether it be Blender or Max Meyer or Houdini or some open source solution, and the engine is the thing that you actually just push them through into. The engine itself isn't open source in the traditional sense of the word, in terms of it doesn't have a development process or board that guides it, and is open source. But the source code itself is out there. The source code is what's available, and so you are at liberty to change that for your own usage. So there's no barrier to using open source tools within the engine at any point. Oh yeah. We're very transparent about what's coming. The roadmap's up on a Trello. We do previews. Yeah.
Any other questions?
A couple at the back.
So I didn't know about the opportunities outside games and film for this tech, but how do I sort of find those opportunities, at least online or events?
Sure. So a good place to start is always the website, because you'll see the customers that are using it, and you can use that as a stepping stone. Do you have a particular area you're interested in, or?
I'm mostly character artist, but yeah, that's it.
Okay, so yeah, if you start at our website, it's probably a good place because you'll see the companies that we've showcased and get yourself an introduction. Recruiters, there are a number of recruiters that are actively recruiting non-gaming UE4 positions. And we're hoping to get more involved at the kind of graduate fair level, end of year level, by bringing non-games companies to those.
At the very start of the talk, you mentioned that, you mentioned like a metaphor with shoe shops, with Epic Game Store being next door and not offering all the other services the other one. I'm guessing what you're focused on there was sort of like the controversies of some of the developers have had exclusive games on in the store and getting backlash.
Yeah.
Have the situation, have they considered a way to slowly stop that from happening? Because that should be a consideration for any new developers signing that contract.
Sure, I mean, we've tried to work out we've tried to work a couple of things. One of the things we've tried to work out is how real that feedback really is, because it's the internet, of course, and so the vocal minority always likes to get upset. But the only solution we have, because people will always be negative, it would appear, is just to make sure that the deal we give to a developer is the best deal the developer can get, or suits the developer. So we'll never force a developer to take to go on the store, or if they don't want to, but we'll try and make it very attractive for them to do so if we want that product. Excuse me. And it seems almost in a sense that every time we address the problem, it kind of almost backfires, publicly anyway. And I think it just is a demonstration of the toxicity within some communities, that whatever you do, you can't win.
Hi, yeah. I wanted to ask, in your opinion, from what you've seen, what sort of knowledge do new startups lack? Like, kind of tagging on to that question about like getting backlash, or like you said, finding a good deal.
That's exactly it. A lot of startups are created by very talented developers who have a great idea and a great product and are pushing it, are building something amazing, but they don't have the biz dev skills or the marketing skills. And there's absolutely no reason why they should have those things. If you're really good at being a developer and developing a title, why should you be good also at the business stuff? And so it's recognizing that early, either recruiting into the project someone who is passionate about that stuff, even if they're inexperienced, who kind of will learn with you guys as you're building the game. They'll kind of come along and build the marketing and biz dev strategy. Or you can consider going to an agent. ISM and DDM are great agents that we have relationships with as Epic, and so we can help kind of broker that relationship. Take the opportunity to meet us at shows and events like this and just kind of bounce ideas off and ask exactly those questions. Because you're right, it's a minefield, and we've seen games, and I've seen games by pretty experienced developers that are absolutely gorgeous, that have launched and utterly disappeared off the face of the planet because they didn't market, they didn't recognize the need or how you market a game. And that's a skill, and it's no less skillful than being a great coder or a great artist. And you should recognize that you cannot, or in very few cases, you cannot be all of those things.
Anyone else?
At the front here.
At one point, you're talking about the marketplace and highlighting things that are more interesting and kind of out there and independent. And that's iterated a lot in being unique and standing out from the crowd. What would you say is your biggest piece of advice to stand out when there are a lot of people around you doing the same thing?
Well, I think you've just said it yourself there. If there's a lot of people doing the same thing, then you're not standing out, are you? I mean, you either have to, there's nothing wrong with kind of iterating on a game style. I mean, a great example of that is Fortnite, frankly. We didn't invent Battle Royale, but we've actually created a pretty damn good version of it. And so there's value to be had in looking at a game style or a genre and then thinking, well, actually, we can twist this. There's something we can do here. What you don't want is a me too. And that is a fine line, because when you're in development, it's very difficult. It's very blinkered. And so you always think that the game you're working on actually is unique. And so having that ability to step back and assess is important. So, yeah, I mean, in very rare cases will a developer come up with an entirely new thing. I mean, it's like books and films, you know, actually 7 genres or whatever it is. But it's about putting that unique twist. And that unique twist could be cultural, you know, so it can be based on geography, and so it talks to a particular audience. You know, these are things you can consider. And the other thing is to make sure that as individuals you're steeped in game culture. If you're building a game, you should really know about games. You know, they should be part of your DNA. You should be that guy that can talk about, you know, all the great stuff. You should know what the game, you know. Right now, I mean, I'll ask you the question actually. What are you playing at the moment?
Nothing, because I don't have time.
Not a good answer.
Destiny 2.
Okay.
Playing at the moment.
Yeah. So that's it. You should, you know, you've got to be passionate. If you're going to get anywhere, you've got to have the passion, and you've got to be absorbed in games and know about games. And that comes from playing them. You can't just be a developer. You've got to play.
I would say it's about playing the games you love and games that you don't like.
Oh,
well.
absolutely. Yeah. Try stuff that you don't think you're going to like, 'cause you might surprise yourself.
It's learning, to be honest. And then you'll, like Mike says there, you'll learn stuff that you don't know, right? And you will find something that why is it bad? If a game is bad, play it and find out why it's bad. Is there something there? Because then you don't make that mistake if you're a developer. You don't fall into that trap. But it's definitely a learning thing.
Yeah, definitely.
Mike, we're out of time, unfortunately.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Dave.
Much.
Oh, pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you.